Hello everyone, welcome back to Fantasy Forge. I'm Cameron Holt, and today I'm going to show you how to make your very own dungeon tiles. All that you're going to need to make these bad boys is some foam core, an Exacto knife, a ballpoint pen, a ball of foil, Mod Podge, and some paint. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is cut our foam core into 5" by 5" squares. This will give us a tile that, in-game, is roughly 25 by 25 feet. I like to mark my measurements with the knife, but you can use a pencil if you want to be more careful than I am. Next, we'll peel off the top layer of paper from the foam core. Some brands are easier to peel than others, but don't be discouraged if some of the paper sticks. For our purposes, the ripped paper may add some interesting texture to the tiles and make them look closer to ruins or old stone. If you're really adamant about it, you can take some extra time with your Exacto knife to carefully remove any excess. When you're finished, be sure to make a lame hand gesture before you move on to the next step, carving. I'm using a ruler to measure out 1" by 1" squares, then carving them into the exposed foam layer with a ballpoint pen. The ballpoint works nicely because it isn't too sharp, so you get a nice visible beveled edge to your lines without catching on the foam and tearing it. Once the lines are in place, I go back in with the pen and freehand some cracks into the stonework. You can skip this step if you're creating neat stone tiles for a temple or a newer stone structure, but I think it adds a good bit of detail for dungeons and older ruins. Next, we'll roll up a ball of foil and press it into the foam to give it a stone texture. It may not look like much now, but when we dry brush later, it'll really make things pop. After the texture is done, it's time to seal the foam. I'm using a mixture of black paint and Mod Podge to get a nice seal on the foam, as well as a base coating of black at the same time. This will keep us from having to use many layers of paint in the next step. When the Mod Podge is dried, it's time to start painting. For stone, I use a gray color from black and white as a base. Remember that acrylic paint dries down and will be a little darker when it's dry than when you're painting it on. When the base coat dries, grab your chunkiest rotten salsa. Wait, that's not right. The next step is to make a black wash for the tiles. Black wash is simply a mixture of black acrylic paint or ink and a decent amount of water. You don't need as much as I've made here for this project, but you can make a lot if you plan to use it on future projects. Personally, I coat almost everything with a black wash before the final steps of painting. Coat the tiles with the black wash and then lightly dab it from the surface with a paper towel. This will leave the cracks and details dark from the carving and the foil, while keeping the base coat visible on higher points. Fair warning, this process can be a bit messy. Lastly, it's time to dry brush. Dry brushing is a technique where you get your highlight color on the brush and then wipe most of it away so there's just enough left to lightly coat the highest points of your tiles. It can be a little tricky at first, but remember that acrylic paint dries darker than it seems when it's wet, so don't be afraid to experiment. I used a very light gray, as well as a light brown, and did 2 coats of dry brushing for some variation in color. And voila! Once everything dries, you've got some dungeon tiles ready to plug and play. These modular tiles are great for those times that your players get into combat in an area that you hadn't planned on, as well as being useful for constructing areas ahead of time if you know they're in for a scuffle. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video or found it helpful, be sure to subscribe for more crafting videos, as well as D&D Pokemon fusions, fantasy art, speed paints, D&D animatics, and all things tabletop and role-playing. What do you want to learn to build in the next crafting video? Dungeon scatter? Miniature cottages? Houses? Maybe even a castle? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll see all of you in the next video. But in the meantime, stay safe out there, adventurers.